Okay, going back to that Ravid, Ravid, let's just summarize what I know, what I don't know. Going back to that Ravid, let's just read it again. We pointed out let's just read that Rama, if you don't mind. Again, Matzah. I actually sent you guys a list of everything we're going to be talking about in the Seder, like 20 minutes ago. So if you have it, this you'll know where we're going in this. Remember, we said that the Rama Shita is that they said the Hallel on the rooftops, or you can say wherever you want, period. And the question was, the Chayra, you need to have it b'makom Suda. That was the question. So he said, what's the problem? He believes that you can say the Hallel afterwards, and that's on that korban and that Hallel which is up on the rooftops. He thinks it's not a Kos Shel bracha, but as the Lashon of the Ramban, it's a Kos Shel Cheres sheyasu olav mitzvah, and that's not a getter of Kos Shel bracha as we described. The Ravid obviously holds not that way. The Ravid holds not the way. He hints at the din of a Kos Shel bracha. If the din of Kos Shel bracha, you have to say it b'makom Hallel. And since if you would have said you would have drank in b'makom Hallel, that would be a chishon of makom Suda. There wouldn't be a mitzaref of the Arba Kais. So this is the tamsis that we learned. The shaila was, how do we understand the answer of Rava to Rav Chanan? This was the question. The problem lies with all this is the question of the Magid Mishnah. Magid Mishnah says, he brings a brisa. The brisa says, Divrei Rabbeinu Mevu'arim b'sei perich ketzad tzaylin at pehem medbeis v'yvov amidalev damina asam amarav gagin v'aliyah slain niskachu. The gagging, the rooftops on the second floors, the top floors of Yerushalayim, then niskachu do not have kedusha of Yerushalayim. Nafkamidim for eating kachim kalim. The Ikshu biyam Rav Hachi, did Rav say that you can't eat kachim kalim and the gagim and the aliyos? V'oma Rav b'shum Rav Chia, didn't Rav say the name of Rav Chia, which was his uncle? Kizaisa Pischa v'Helela Pakeigra, the Kizaisa Pesach and the Hallel split the rooftops. What does that mean to say? That they said the Hallel on the rooftops. That the Gemara might love the Achla Be'igra. It sounds like they ate it in the on the top floor, on the Igra, on the roof. That's where they said the Hallel. The kids who know, Lloyd, the Achla Ba'ara, they ate on the bottom floor, which definitely has Kedusha Yerushalayim, where you can eat Kachim Kalim. But they said it up on the top of the floor. Which means to swear, you Amar Rav, why don't we have dessert? The people should move from one group to another because Pesach is only Nechal with the Bnei Chabura, and for the Gemara, no, the meat is like Kasha, Kam B'Shas Achila, Kan Shalei B'Shas Achila. V'zem B'vur. Well, Kochalei Amru, the B'Shas Achila, Asa Elam Shum Pesach, V'zem B'Or, there doesn't seem to be a problem. So what do we see here? But first, that they did the Hallel on the rooftops, Lechatchila. The question is, how, according to the Ravid, how did this happen? If they said the Hallel at the rooftops, Lechatchila, how are they yotz the mitzvah? A kocher, you have to say that on the top they said the Hallel, and there is no din of kais. And then they had to come back again according to the Ravid and say Hallel again. That's what you have to say. The question is, if that's the case, what was the mechayiv of the Hallel on the rooftops, which is not mechayiv the kais bracha? Okay, Mashenke, the Hallel, and so to speak, in the Suda is a mechayiv of the kais bracha. That's the question. What are the two mechayiv of the Hallel according to the Ravid? That's the question on the table. The Maisa, it goes like this. Let me just 1 minute to make it order here. I actually wrote this down. It should be orderly. Very good. Okay, so the Maisa, it all starts with the Sifnei Shulchan Aruch. The Sifnei Shulchan Aruch says by the din of Afikaima. So the Shulchan Aruch writes in Tafai and Zion. Yeah. La'achar Gemar Aleph. La'achar Gemar Kol Asuda. Oich the Matzah Shmur Tachas Hamapa. Kizai is Kol Echad Zechel HaPesach HaNechel Al HaSoiva. V'yochlenu Ba'aseva. V'lo Yivorach Olav. V'yez Zoy Lo Oich Le'koidem Chatzos. The luck is that you have to eat it before Chatzos. That's what Raja. That's what the Mechaber writes. So he adds the Ramah. Yagdim Atzmai, he should make a little earlier. Shigam Hallel Yikr Kaidem Chatzai. So the Ramataka adds that the Hallel also has to be for Chatzot. So we're talking about the second Hallel here. When you talk Yagdim Atzmai, we're talking in context of the Afikoima. It means the Hallel of after the Afika, after Birchas Hamaz. This also has been done before. Let's watch the Makkos, Iran, and Avib Psachim, and also the end of Megillah. Now, what is the story about? The Maisa, that's the halacha. As I mentioned before, there's a certain thing, Taisus. It's a Shailim Bali at Taisus. I'll start with Taisus. You have it in your sheets. Actually, I think, yeah, I sent it. Okay. It's in Taisus Rabbeinu Yehuda Silion Chosid. That's, let me see, yeah, I have it here. So where's the stuff? It says the Chosid. It's found in Brachas Daf Tes Amid Aleph. There, the Taisus Rabbeinu Yehuda, they call it Rabbi Yehuda Chosid, Rabbi Yehuda Silion. It depends what I saw you have. So he writes as follows. The Maisa is mistapik is the halacha like Rabbi Akiva or like Rabbana or like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So he says Pesach is still Chatzos or is Pesach Kol Halayla. That's a machlokes Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva. And it's a machlokes of what the Rishonim of how we're machriya that halacha. Now there's another shaila on the table. Now the halacha is Kol Halayla, but we say midrabana you should have it only until Chatzos. Just like Kriya Shema Sha'avis Shlahachik Adam in Avera. So there's two issues. First of all, what's the Ikra din? Second of all, what's the Shaila? What if there's a din derabana, or if Allah be a keeper, do we say Lahachik Adam in Avera? So the Taisus Rabbeinu Yehuda, Syria, and Rice, I'll just read it here. I Shaykh HaChaka B'Hallel B'Kriyat Shema Koshkin B'Matzah V'Afilu Nekel B'Kriyat Shema Yesh lo lahachmir b'matzah kivin shumin ha'Torah. But Kriya Shema is derabana. That depends on what we're talking about in Kriya Shema. Afilu man the Isli kamam b'peg mishemeishu the Kriya Shema de'iraisa. Shema reitz oleimer das machu akra. This is not negate to you. This is negate to people who learn brachas. At the end of the day, he says it's something which is deraisa. Definitely, the halacha should be that what. That we should have a din of archaka, and therefore the matzah is deraisa. We should have an archaka of chatzos. Mikol k'neig Rabbeinu le'echol matzah koydem chatzos, v'chein matzah sha'afikoyma. Not just the matzah deraisa, the first matzah. This is matzah sha'afikoyman, and then writes v'afilu Hallel haya nochain lagdimai koydem chatzos. Afa pi she'enu chumer yosem rekriyat shema. The Paskin Le'elker of Gamliel, etc. He doesn't explain why, but he said that's the way it is. He said that all the Hallel is Pashas not the right. Why is it that we should be marked with Dafka Kodim Chatzos? So he said he doesn't give a reason. I'm writing it carefully. He says Lechol Matzah Kodim Chatzos v'chein Matzah Shafi Kaiman. This I can understand because if we're Choshesh Shafi Kaiman, we could be Choshesh Shittas the Rashbam that that's a din deraisa, as we discussed in previous classes. So since you're Choshesh for Shittas or Rashbam, that the Afikoyim is the key of deraisa, that should also be Kodim Chatzos. Then he has Va'afilu Hallel Haya Nochain. It's very interesting language. It would be right also Lagdimai Kodim Chatzos. There's an afilu here, but it's the right thing to do without actually explaining why. The Rashba brings this and the Ritva brings this in Brachas Daf Tes. The Maisa, this is a machlekes harishonim because Taisus in Megillah explicitly says something else. Taisus writes in Megillah in Daf, where is it? Here it is. 1 minute. Let me find the Megillah here. No, it's not in the right place. Yeah, Taisus in Megillah, Daf Chof Aleph Amid Aleph La'asuya Achil Psachim D'Leiker Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The end of the second paragraph. Mamish, the last Taisus in the second paragraph of Megillah. So Taisus writes there. The Gemara here says Stama that the Mishnah goes not according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and that Pesach is called a Laila. Mikam near the halachic Rabbi Elazar, Afal Bikain, I think seems to be the halachic of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Why? The Ikas Stammer Ba'arbe Psachim, the Stammer Mishnai Snav Psachim, the Koi Kavasei, where we have that the Stana Pesach Achach Chatzos Metamis Sayadai. If it's metamas he'adayim, so the chay means to say it. Shalei b'zman, it's gemanu. It's like nicer. V'chay mishnah eizem mekayman. V'stama b'seifer kama the brachas. Mishnah eizem mekayman. You say it every day. Pesach and nechla b'layla v'nechla elat chatzos. V'stama b'seifer kama the brachas and daf test. Kava meiser bo banushub gamlir b'is amishto amalem kol masham chacham at chatzos. Mitzvahs not sheyala amid ha'shaka v'ila achilus p'sachim like study. There's one thing, umukalek for blazer and azay, damer at chatzos, because it's deraisa, so we don't have to say. That's how the Gemara for teaches the Mishnah in Brachas when it says kol ma she'amru chachamim ad it means kol halayla. It's at chatzos la'archaka. It doesn't include also Pesach. And the Gemara explains the stomach of the Mishnah is going according to Rebbe Lazar, which chatzos is deraisa. So I have a stomach of the Gemara in Brachas, a stomach of the Mishnah in Zvachim, and a stomach of the Mishnah in Psachim of Kufchav, like Rebbe Lazar ben Azai. The imkain, because we are what? Imkain that what? That the stars that near the halacha of the blazman azay. It's tzarich lemaher v'leechol matz matzah b'leilei psachim kaidem chatzos. Because since we hold halacha imkain, since we hold halacha of the blazman azay, that Pesach is until chatzos, so then we have to be made makbid on matzah too. Va'afilu matzah shafi kaima. Not just the stam matzah, which is the raisa. We should definitely not chatzos. Why? Because we understand the zman says b'zman Pesach. Because that's the mokkah the halacha afal pi. That the pasuk that makes it the rice is halacha is not the same pasuk as the which says that example. Why do we equate matzah to korban Pesach? Because the pasuk says sli eshu matzahs amarim yachlo. But that's if that's that pasuk because the Gemara doesn't have kuf chav, that we wouldn't have matzah the rice b'zman as that because you need matzahs in Pesach and marorim. We don't have matzahs in Pesach. Why do we have matzah deraisa? The Gemara says, "I had your club be'erev techlu matzahs." So remember the Gemara of Kuf Chof Amidal. Since it says be'erev techlu matzahs, no, it doesn't say over there the hekesh between matzah and Pesach. But this is something that Rishonim took for granted. It's very interesting that the same dinei matzah, which is matzah korban, hechal also on the matzah is the mechayiv of that same matzah without the korban. Not that it's a separate mitzvah. That's the mechayiv even without the korban. The Rambam is actually minor. Interesting. So he's minding a matzah from this pasuk, and the other mitzvah, when it comes to mitzvahs, matzah of korban, he did not mind it as a mitzvah b'defnei atzmai, because that's a prat and achilus hakorban. Apal pikein. Oh, the one is a prat and achilus hakorban, the other is a mitzvah b'defnei atzmai. But the agdor is we took the matzah hakorban and made it a mitzvah b'defnei atzmai. That's the agdor. And therefore, l'chayra this man is until chatzos. That's good for the first matzah. What about afikaim? It says afil matzah shutem. Why sharei chiv matzah bisman zeu derais? So asher b'chein. How does that answer anything? Since chiv matzah is derais, what does he mean? The afikaim. The afikaim the chzikha derabbanan. The teretz says once again we're chayshish to the Rashbam. What means sharei chiv matzah b'zman zeh rice? That's very nice, but we did that in the first matzah. What's with the second matzah? And to Harash Taisus is Saisim, that's enough. That's the reason for chatzos. Why? Because we pass on Rabbi ben Azariah. He's not talking outside of our chaka, like Rabbi Akiva, because the whole Taisus starts with imkain that we pass on Rabbi ben Azariah. He doesn't say that the chatzos la'achigodim and averu. We don't need it because that's ikar adin. So he says, "Sharichi of matzah b'zman zeu deraisu and derivas." How does that explain anything? That's your question. Pashas, it means to say he's going with the Rashbam's shita. Therefore, since A, or you could possibly say even it's midrabanan. It's midrabanan a tzura of how to be mikayim a deraisa. Okay, so midrabanan you have to do it, but since ikar deraisa it has the same din in one or two. It's not stammer din derabanan. It's either called something which is ikar deraisa. It's also nigbar and deraisa. Not just a zeichel or korban. They decide that you need another kiyum of matzah alas flavor. Not just zeichel or korban pesach, as people naturally say. That otherwise it would just be zeichel or korban pesach. This Taisa wouldn't make sense. But then Taisa ends, taking for granted that we pass through Rebbe ben Azariah. Let's remember this. Avu b'halo she'acha fi kaiman ein lahach mikol kach sharei midrabanu. What does that mean? What does that mean? I don't know what he's talking about. Okay? Was meint this? That means it's Iker D'Rabbanan. That's a davar pasha. It's not even a tzur of a kiyum deraisa. It's Iker D'Rabbanan, and therefore what? What does he want to say here? What's he doing here? Why would I think that the halal should be dafka at chatzais? We say no because it's D'Rabbanan. Let's remember, it's not that other people would like to learn this Taisus. He's mistopic whether the halachas Rabbi Akiva or like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So he figures for a din D'Rabbanan we're not machmer kol kach. But that's not the lashon of Taisus. The Taisus in the first takes his whole Taisus is based on the anachah. The halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And he dafka predicates this whole statement, saying v'im kain. That's a word which should be underlined. Im kain, that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That's the tzarech l'zoyer, etc. So the whole spiel here starts. The chatzos is based on halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and afal pi kain, not the halal. She'en la'achmer kol kach sharei midrabbanhu. Bas meint it says like, what about morer? Morer d'chaychet d'rabban. Morer zekhet d'rabban. So is there a dinat chatzos? Doesn't mention it. Doesn't seem to be an issue. The issue is specifically this halacha kiven d'rabbanan. Vos meintos. Vos meintos. It's a rabbanan and not a deraisa. First of all, we have to understand which halal deraisa could have been. What's he trying to say? If he come, it could be a kiyum of a deraisa. He wants to say that halal is not a kiyum of a deraisa. Not a kiva d'rabbanan of a deraisa. It's only a d'rabbanan. So therefore, we understand more. We can understand the zeichel l'migdash that he's not even talking about. Why? More was never pushed. Although it's zeichel l'migdash is definitely before chatzos. That wasn't the question on the table. The shaila was only this halal. What's the story here? What's the shot in this story? And it's against this taisvus that Rabbi Yehuda Achad says no. Nothing that you should say the halal before chatzos. So we have to try to understand what the nekudas hamachlekes is, but without the what is the pshat and taisvus here in Megillah? What's he inferring to? What's he talking about? Leilach or kol kach. Pashtus, the idea of saying halal that night the chatzos without the taisvus, one would have said it could be a kiyum deraisa based on the famous the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvahs in Mitzvah say Kuf Nun Zayin. As the Chinuch brings it down in Kuf Chaf Aleph, that pshat is the part of Sippi Tzit Mitzrayim. We got to the Binchas, the Hoydus, the Kadosh Baruch we made on Nisim, etc. That would be a possibility. With that, L'chara would be a kiyum of a deraisa. The answer is that's very sweet, but that would only fit for the first hour. Because we know the Gemara says in Gaf Tuf Tezayin that we said you're chaysim with the bracha asher ga'alanu. And what does the Rashbam explain? What are you chaysim? If you remember, we saw that Gemara. Chaysim es ha'agada. That was the lashon of the Rashbam. Okay, chaysim doesn't mean chaysim the Hallel. It means chaysim es ha'agada. That was lashon of the Rashbam in Psachim. Let me find it here for a moment. Oh God, that was the lashon. The Asher Galanu finishes the mitzvah Sibitzit Mitzrayim. Mishnah Kuf Tezayin Amid Beis. Mishnah says we say lefichach, all these different things that we learned, and then you until alaluka, and then it says v'chaysem b'geula. What does it mean? Reb Tarfanam Asher Ga'alanu v'Ga'as Afisein. Is that the right one? V'chaysem b'geula. Messiah Mesagada v'Birchas Geula. We pointed out that the Rashbam, the Gemara Daf Kuf Yud Zayin Amid Beis, is Mashma says that the Hallel is nechtam with that. The Hallel is not L'Asher Ga'alanu. There's a Rashbam there. We learned this in previous year. The Hallel Asher Rashbam Tiva Maschel the Hallel Kuf Yud Zayin Amid Beis. She'arbe Psachim She'chaysim Gal Yisrael. She'misaper Mishabech Agulas Yisrael She'avra. That's it. That's the Hallel Rishon. So what does the Rashbam tell you here? Pshat in the Gemara. Yes, that Hallel. I don't need a Rambam or Sefer HaMitzvah or Chinuch. I have a stomach of the Gemara. I'll leave it to Rashbam. That that Hallel, which is found in the first part of Hallel, found in the Agada, is the last piece of the Agada. The Chasimas Hallel is also the Chasimas Agada. That's what it is. But the get is Chasimas Agada. That's what he understands. They may have another dimension to the two, which is not finished yet, which is Rishon. That's a Ramban, Reb David Bonfil, V'chol Chachmei Sforat, that the Hallel is also Mischayiv Midin, Leil Pesach, whole Hallel, and it's not finished. And the Chasim, there's a Chasim, the Chasim is on the Agada, not on the Hallel. And or, want to be more lumdavlach, that dimension of the Hallel, which is part of the Agoda, the Chasim is Gal Yisrael. As much as the dimension of Hallel, which is not part of the Agoda, it's an independent din of Hallel. You either say it in the Beis HaKnesses or you say it during the night. There's a hefsek, so the Ramban explains this is not called a hefsek. That's what the Ramban is marshiv by Chavin is Kedushim Navet Psachim. And the Taka says that whether you ended the Chasim of that is the last brach of Hallel, as we always say, last brach of Hallel. Yalalucha. That's the brach of Hallel that we finish. So obviously he understands A or two, one of two, either that the Hallel in the beginning is not part of the Agoda at all, and the Chaysim goes on the goes on the Agoda. Excuse me, Adria. You have to say that the first part of Hallel is definitely part of the Agoda. It says the Chaysim, and Chaysim is the Agoda. So you see they're clear that the Hallel has it two dimensions according to the Ramban. It didn't have Hallel for itself, and didn't have Hallel as part of Sipur Tzis Mitzrayim. But the Chasima of the Hallel for itself is only at the end. That's the Ramban. We call up in the Groim Achra. We call Kach Misvara. That's the honest truth. And that's the Goinim. You really want to know. That is their din. But then the Rashbam is Daimavur. The same Chasimi calls Chasimis Hallel and calls Chasimis Agad. So B'chol Eifen, I'm trying to say that halacha of Hallel being a Kiyum Deiraisa is Zikr only talking about the first Hallel. So that's Zikr, not what the Taishas is talking about. Because on that there's a Chasima. So Taishas is not talking about that. So what is he talking about? The Teretz is Pashut. This goes back to the Mishnah of Gamliel as we read it. If you recall the Mishnah of Gamliel, we learned the Girsis Harif from the Rosh and the Rambam. So we explained that that's a davar pashut. It's a Mishnah in Psachim. The Pashut says that the mechayiv of the Pesach of the Hallel is the korban. I'm going to read it shortly. The mitzvah is to say that, just like the mitzvah say what's the reason, what does it symbolize. It also have the mitzvah to elucidate what to say, and because it symbolizes X, we also have to do Y. And that's part of the lefichach, as we explained that the lefichach is the lashon Rabban Gamliel. Now I want to see carefully what that means. And here you have a Mefurish Mishnah, which clearly says that the Hallel of Leil Pesach, its mischayiv is the korban proper. Now let's look at that clearly in the sugya itself, if you don't mind. The sugya is in Daf Tzadik Hey.
Rabbi?
I'll take it a minute. I just want to first just read this, and I have a reason to make a little faster today. 1 minute, I'll take your question soon. Let's read the Mishnah in Daf Tzadik Hey Amid Aleph Psachim, where the Mishnah says, "Ma ben Pesach Rishon and Pesach Shein." What's the difference between the two korbanos Pesach Rishon and Pesach Shein? So, Dr. Mishnah, Pesach Rishon Aser by Yerah by Yematzei. Vasheni chametz matzah ima babayis. The Rish Pesach Rishon, it's Aser by Yerah by Yematzei. Not just that, it's a halacha of what the leisishkat al chametz dam zivchi. It's not just by Yerah by Yematzei. It's an isra and a psul in the shchita. Mashenkin over here. The din is you can have chametz, you can have matzah in your house at the same time. A rishon ton halo ba'achilasai. The first one needs halo when it eats. Ba'asheni ein ton halo ba'achilasai. V'zeh ton halo ba'asiyasai. But both of them need halo b'shas asiyah. Now let's try to understand what did it say l'chayr? What does it say here? You read the stomach of the Mishnah. Mishnah seems to be saying that it's a getter of halacha of what? That the mitzvah is mechayev halo. Now, lemais it's a mefurish Rashi. The Gemara says in Amid Beis, Tzadik Hey Amid Beis, Harishon ton halo b'achilasai zok the Gemara menahani mili. How do we know this? Amar Reb Yochanan b'shum Reb Shimon Yud Tzadik. This is the same Reb Shimon Yud Tzadik which made the list of the halos. Amar Kra, the pasuk says that shir yiyeh lachem, the shir, the agula, asida, will all be burst out into song. It'll be like the Hallel, like the shir that we all sing at the night when the sanctification of the Yom Tov starts. Laila mekudesh l'chag, that Laila mekudesh l'chag ton Hallel. Laila she'ein mekudesh l'chag ain't toin Hallel. Dot Rashi. Hashiyah lechem b'yom shetigalu min ha'gos kaveh iskad shchag k'may shetem negim l'shoyre b'leilei iskad shchag ve'en lecha layil chag lahatin shir chutz mileil pesach chachim al achilasai. Weiter. V'zeh ashir achilasai. Something more right. Rashi right. Laila mekudesh chag Pesach Rishon she'ein mekudesh chag leil achilas Pesach sheini yontif. No. Then the Gemara says, "V'zeh is a tone basiyasan." They both need Hallel basiyasan. Zot the Gemara. Why? My timer. Ibais ema laila kamamayit yoim like kamamayit. Laila a Pesach sheni yivamayit. But yoim you're not mamayit. Shus manasiyasan loy miyit. I read you Pesach Rishon Rashi should tone Hallel b'shas shchitosoi. Kidamin about tamid onishchat. Ulkaman amrin levin shebeneim tiknem shiyo emra akoper koper kodavar chidush. That's possibility one. Ibai seima. Another possibility is of the Gemara. Efshe Yisrael sheichtim pischayim v'naitin luleim ve'ein amrin shira. How's that possible? No, it doesn't say and zot Rashi. Efshe the kivun the dvar mitzvahu ton Hallel. Now, obviously, it doesn't say there's no such efsher on tefillin and mezuzah and tzitzis. Okay, we'd be saying Hallel all day. So you got to look for a common denominator between achilas shchitas pesach and the tilas lulav, which are certain types of mitzvahs, which, without going into the particular, but I hope you can understand yourself, they're based on haidor lanes or haidor kadosh baruch hu. The idea of a lulav is called as a is therefore haidor. Anybody who learns lulav agazel remembers the famous Ravid. That's why lulav yavish is puzzle, because we says loya mesim yahaluka. Remember that, okay. So that, and we also know that the tzura of akim of mitzvah of lulav is through the anuim and the Hallel ki yadua. Okay, we discussed this at length when we learned that thing way long time ago. Okay, Yidosh Teitech and Korban Pesach is obviously the same thing. You read the Ramban, you'll understand. Because the Korban Pesach signifies Geula, that's the Iker mitzvah, which needs Hallel. If you read the Ramban finally that I left you to read, that big Ramban of Psachim, we can understand that. So mitzvahs which signify a mesiba, a reason for thanking, that you have it. So that's these are mitzvahs. Actually, are you talking that they wouldn't say? So there seems to be a svara. Now this svara seems to be a reason for what? Now what's the Agdar that svara? So the Ramban elaborates on this. The Ramban elaborates on this and Sefer HaMitzvah and Sheirish HaRishon. This is not the place where I'm going to learn the whole sugi of Hallel Deraisa D'Rabbanan. I would suggest reading Sheirish Aleph of Sefer HaMitzvahs. That is a big issue that the Ramban deals with. Okay, it runs between Kama B'Kama Sugis. It's a nice easy read. But this is the Gemara and this is Rashi. It's before in the Gemara. That is definitely there's no Kedushas Azman on Pesach Rishon B'Shas Shchita. And Afro Pikein there's a Chiyuv of Hallel. Okay, let's get that straight. There's no Kedushas Azman and no Isser Malacha there. And Afro Pikein there's a Din Hallel because of the Shchita. The Hallel is set on the Shchita, not just on the Achila. Let's put this on the table so we understand the certain things which come from the mitzvah itself. That's what it seems to be saying, which is interesting. So it's interesting to notice that we say this svara here, and over there we have a svara. Before we have a pasuk. Granted. So near the shaila is this sibus of this machayev. So we see here clearly that the lashon is that what's tone in the achila means because the gufa korb. Now, if the same language applies both to the achila and to the shchita, can we the Mishnah? And since the language of tone on the achila is clearly mischayv because of the korban and because of the mitzvah aspect of the korban, so l'chor that same tone is also the halacha of the achila, that the achila sapesa is a machayev. That's l'chor what you say here. Afapi that l'chor they have to be different. Why do I say that? Because the machayev of the shchita definitely it does not have a din of Isser Malacha and Mayit. We don't have such a halacha. It's a din b'kahala because of the mitzvah mechayivim without Isser Malacha and Mayit. Yeah, we come to the halacha of the achila. There the halacha is for ketis. From that pasuk that we learned that halacha kedushas asman demands Isser Malacha and Mayit. it seems to be saying that the halal achila, although it may be coming because of the korban, but the background is a zman mekudesh for isur malacha and mayid and karbanos. So there's a clear difference. One would be a halacha simply in the korban. The other is the korban is a machayev within context of a certain background. There's a difference between shchitas haPesach and achilas haPesach. Shchitas haPesach does not demand a background of a zman mekudesh for isur malacha and chiluk karbanos. Mashenken achilas haPesach, that's the mucker of the halacha that halav kedushas hazman demands isur malacha and malkum mechuluk for karbanos. That's the whole mucker. We learned that in the Gemara in Erechim Daf Yudam and Beis. I learned it with you. So here we see something really very interesting. I'm going to leave it. There's more. I'm not going to do this to the end today. I'm just let's get this done with. Pesach is over. Excuse me, never over. It was added to my biography. Okay, footnote always used to tell me it never leaves you. It gets added. V'hasienu means pack it in for us. Okay, so it depends how they taxed it. Okay, but whatever it be, yeah. Sometimes they stick in some hole in the attic. You never see it again. So it's kilo it left you. So you have to keep it in mind. I mean, yeah, whatever. Anyway, so this is the Agdari here, but clearly we see it's halacha. This so we understand. It's a din of the mitzvah. That this mitzvah because the mitzvah, as we pointed out, this is the memory of Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel explained. This is what Rabbi Gamliel is saying. The Mishnah alone is not explicit. There's makom to be mechalik between the mitzvah achila and the hal of shchita and the hal of the hal of shchita, hal of the achila. There's a possibility to make a difference because conceptually there has to be a difference. My only dirk of Ashva is because the same lashon is tone. Okay, so there's definitely a place for Gamliel to elucidate and explain that in the Mishnah Daf design. So I want you to understand the mechayiv is the halal, is the korban pesach. Pshat is what? When? B'shas achila, because that's the balayla. We're not talking about the halal bayayim. So that goofers the chiddush of Gamliel. Not only we have to say it, he's also explaining the pshat in the Mishnah Tzadik A. That afal pi that leil pesach is already a din of makom kedushas the zman and isur malacha. And without that, you wouldn't say Hallel, even on the Achila, Kachsmuchach from the Gemara, because if not, you could never learn from that anywhere else. Afal Pikain, that is a Mischai because of the Korban. That's the Chiddush of Gamliel in the Mishnah Daf Ketiv Zayin. The Pshat in the Mishnah in Tzadik A, B, that you have to elucidate, you have to actually say it. That's the Chir what comes out from that, from Gamliel, more than the stomach of the Mishnah. Once we understand that, and there's major nafkaminas, we're not going into it at the moment, but there's major nafkaminas. Nafkamina would be, for example, as far as dushas azmanim, and isha is parted from Hallel. You know that, right? So mitzvah feisha azman grum. But she's chayiv and korban pesach. There's a nafkamina. Pashta nafkamina. She's chayiv and korban pesach. The kolam is chayiv and korban pesach. She's also chayiv. There's a nafkamina for Anisha. Can she be mitzvah you the halal of Leil Pesach? Okay, this is one of many. We're not going into. I don't want to spread out too much. So this is l'chayim of word. This comes from Gamliel, as we pointed out. This is takim mefurish in Rambam Hilchos Korban Pesach. We pointed that out. The Rambam lashon in Hilchos Korban Pesach in Perek Ches when he writes Fabi Arnu. When he writes in Perek Ches at the end of the Perek, he writes Halacha Tezvok Far Bi'anu B'Kama Mekomos She'ein HaPesach Necha Ela Ad Chatzos. He passes the Rebbe Kiva. He argues with the Tosfos, and the reason is Kedei La'archik Min HaAveira. That's a machlekes. I told you it's a machlekes. When we pass Rebbe Kiva, we pass Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. V'din Torah sheyachol kol alayla shiad amad hashachar. Derech Agav, I want you to know, one Tosfos writes that although the din is a country of Elazar, we pass with Rebbe Elazar, it's at chatzos, but it's not noiser until the layla. Interesting. Not the shot is like it has a zman shlomim until chatzos. As much as the Pesach is a shlomim, it's a kol alayla. The key in mitzvah of Pesach in that korban shlomim is only at night. That's a mefurish Tosfos, which is worth remembering. Okay. Okay, then he says, "Vayte v'kfar bi'arnu b'ilchos chametz u'matzah shuton halal b'shas achilasa." Now, where's this? You can look up Chametz and Matzah from Date to Mouth. There's only one place of where that is. There's only one place, literally, that to say that it's told. That's when he quotes the Lefichach of Rabbi Gamliel. When he quotes in Perek Vav Yichus Chametz and Matzah. When he quotes in Hilchos Chametz and Matzah Perek Ches, etc. What's he doing? He's quoting the Mishnah of Gamliel. That's the only place where it says that's because of the Achila. That's the only place it can be. I would love anybody to give me another suggestion. I don't think it's possible. I don't think there is. There's a mufurish in the Rambam that the mark of the Allah is Rabbi Gamliel, right? It's true, because in the Mishnah alone, Tzaddik Hey, that wouldn't be muchach 100%. There's place to eat weasel out, as I mentioned, wiggle out, as I mentioned before. One has a din, as a din also, which has the background of Kedushas Azmanim, and the other one doesn't. Afal P. Kane, Rabbi Gamliel tells me that's the pshat. Okay? That's the group of the Chiddush of Rabbi Gamliel. That's why the Rambam says, where was he Mavar? This in Perek Ches, Allah Hey. That's who was Mavar. That's a Davar Pasha. So now we know that that's the getter of this halacha, okay? And that's the getter of this halacha, okay? As we pointed that out. No. Now, Lamais the Ramban, if you want to see the Ramban inside, like we should read a few pieces of the Ramban just to point out where he writes this. I'll show the Ramban in a few places here. I'm just read a few of these pieces, little legacy of the Ramban, that's good for Zion. It's really a very special Ramban. So the Ramban is like, Mikanirik shu kaira isa bebeis ton bracha shu b'chal yamim shayochi germem sahala sheim kodam v'kar b'esak tesa and so shivu rabim taima. V'lo b'gmar dilam b'perik ein nerachin echin tani l'adre b'shimba yitzadik. They bring the price of shmein shayochi germem sahala. V'lo tani le'el shel pesach. Zu ein espora. That's not a question. To Hasam Hallel the Asiyah some mitzvahs like Tani. He also learned that Saibis man Shchita and Saibis man Achila called Hallel Asiyah some mitzvahs. Teda do money nami b'shchitas a Pesach. It doesn't mention shchitas a Pesach, and you can add it there. There's takin no din kushas as man. The Tani lube maslit lahasam. V'ay the hasam yanuv Tani. It says yabim doesn't make nights. We point out maybe days are not nights. We discussed it in the That's one point. Then there's another piece. I'll tell you a few of them. Then he writes, Miklal advoim shahalo zebel pesach tonu bracha likmar sahalo shein der b'fir shishav k'moshe pirashnu. There's different halacha. There's a din of halo, and you have to end it with we have to say bracha likmar sahalo. Tama atzmacha heich lo yeton bracha she'ein lecha halo choiva ki achilas psachim shehu shas geula. How could be any halo more choiva than halo of achilas psachim, which he said before is because of the mitzvah? Shehi shas geula, because it's in a framework of a time of geula. Do you see what he's doing here? Merging Dushas Azman with the mechayiv of a mitzvah. Just read the language. There's no such chayva. Ki achilas psachim shehu shas geula. V'chein shaninu zeh v'zeh told halav achilas, and he brings the mission of Tzadik A. V'samchil al hamikra d'chsiv b'shir yelachem kelelis kaddish chag. That's what he has. That's clear in the Ramban. So we see here from the Ramban, this you say, the Ramban says two more things which are important. Affected the kasha. This question that you ask on the Goinim, how can they say you need a bracha? L'chayra, there's a hefsek between the two pieces of halal. What does he answer? Didn't they say if you do one mitzvah and you spoke in the middle, you don't say the Ein Chayzim Mavarach? K'may Hallel Shemavarach and Kaidem L'Kriyasiv Afal became a perek the perek Paisiv Lo Yutzav Lazu Lavarach or L'Chatchil Matir Le'Av B'Kriya Shepnei HaKorv B'nei HaYira. What does he say over here? He says that basically that's not called a hefsek. Whatever is mutter to be mafsek, which is the Seder Advarim, that's okay. That's not called a hefsek. is they're doing one mitzvah and you're certain things you're allowed to be mafsik for. What does that mean? What's he saying? That is Seder Ayoim. He explains it in 2 minutes. So let's right to the Ramban. V'oichel divrei sham. Kiyaz de miyushav. Utkiyaz de me'umad. Bracha achas l'kulon. V'osel hafsik ben. V'afal pikein oimer atfila. V'ashrei. How do you do that? Why isn't that a hefsik? This he do a shayoim eno hefsik. What does that mean? V'af kan eno hefsik. Shekach hiskinu lemitzvah v'sidroi shayoim u. What does that mean? He's saying something else. It's not just because it's mutter to be mafsik, because that's the tzura of how to do it. Chatchil chazav or masak in 2 halves of Hallel with the brachas and the suda in the middle. That's the tzura mitzvah. The tzura mitzvah is to do it that way. Okay? Comes out lafia according to that's the way it should be done. So obviously it's a davar pasha. There's no hefsek. Hefsek is siddur shayim. It's what the Yishayim discuss. How is it mutter to say yotzers? The yotzers today, you guys don't live in shows that say yotzers, but used to say yotzers in the middle of Birchas Kriya Shema and many other things. Why isn't there hefsek? The teretz is that's the tzurus tefillah. That's how it was done. They said piyutim. Okay, the Gra took them all out for whatever reason it be, but all the Rishonim said them. Chutz me'elus. So first of all, he's mashvit the tkiyas me'yushav and tkiyas me'umad. What does it mean to say? Yes, you daven in the middle. You daven in the middle. Why isn't it hefsek? Because that's the way it's supposed to be done. They made it with brachas, and that's the way it's supposed to be done. Well, that's how they made the Hallel. That's the Seder Advarim. The Hallel is made in 2 book-ending to the mitzvahs of the Miyayim, Matzah, Mara, Kairach, and the Shulchan Aruch. And the schmoozing in the middle, obviously. Okay, that's how it's done. They didn't take for granted. I know there are people which are mocked not to talk, but that's because I didn't find this in Rishonim. Okay, it'd be pretty morbid not to say hello to anybody during the Seder. But that's some people are chayshish to. But relax. You have to relax. Chutz mi'elu, he says something unbelievable. Birchas HaTorah. The Me'ikr Ta'kanta, Me'ikr Adin, I don't know if you know the Gemaras. Me'ikr Adin, the first oiler is supposed to make the first bracha, and the last oiler makes the second bracha. The only reason we constantly make each aliyah 2 brachas is because people, as usual, they walk in and out. They got to go to the Kiddush club and come back. So we have to make and they have to hear the brachas. So therefore, we make sure everyone hears 2 brachas. It's B'shum Gzeres HaNichnasim V'Hayotzim. Those state Mefush and Gemara, right? So he says, Me'ikra Adin, who makes the first bracha? The Kayin. Who makes the last bracha? That's the Goyvel, the guy, the last aliyah. Okay? Me'ikra Adin, that's Shvi, Achrit. Barei Kan, Kama of Sokish, Shizeh Birich V'Korav V'Nistalik, V'Holach Lei, V'Shem Yotzel L'Shuk, V'Zeh Kei B'Bracha Shaloi Ad Shiva V'Achrin, Ma'vorich V'Soif V'Paita B'Bracha Shaloi Sheisha Rishonim. How's it possible? Guy's not even there anymore. Kiven the Kriyas Kol Hashiva Choyve L'Yoyim Mitzvah Achatzi Vein Afsokas Shalem Klum She'ikir Mitzvah Zu B'Afsokas Ha'ilu. That's how the mitzvah is. She says V'chein Kriyas Hala Al Achilas Psochim Umatzah Choyva Vein Afsokas Shesuda Geremes Bracha Loi B'Tchil Loi B'Soif. Now, to understand, Bush stated that the coin is with the Suda in the middle of the test. This is Avona Pshuta based on the Tais and Daf Kuf Ches, because that's the idea of the matzah. It's supposed to be Tzuras Suda, if you remember. The Ikra Suda, there's a concept of Suda in the matzah, so some you can do just a minimum Suda, or you do it also with the Knedalach. At the end, the Suda is Hayyim, which Ikra is with matzah. That's the tzura of the mitzvah. The mitzvah, the matzah is Ikra Suda. That's the Mechayiv of Aseba, as we explained in the Tais Daf Kuf Ches. That's right. That's not called a hefsek. Hilkach mevarach b'tchila mitzvah u'b'seifa, etc. There you have it. There you have it first in the Ramban. That's an unbelievable Ramban. So we see from the Ramban that the Hallel is not just the Hallel is on the matzah, but it has a certain surah. It has to be done. So the first that the Hallel at the night is on the matzah. Allah Chias Matzah, more etc. That's the Cheret, that's a Rambam Ramban, Taisus Reishulian, etc. That's why it's a davar pasha that the Hallel has to have chatzos. How if that's chatzos? Because if it's a din which is mechai because of the matzah, but the matzah slash the pesach equals therefore it's the same halacha. Just like you say matzah, the same thing you say hallel. Whatever the din is, that's a davar pasha. Tosfos Megillah obviously doesn't think so. And what is Tosfos right? The right Tosfos is mashma that if the hallel ala pesach, Tosfos is mashma the enach nama, there is a hallel d'oraisa. Where is the hallel d'oraisa? The hallel on the pesach is d'oraisa, and that would have to be until chatzos. Where's the makkah? The hallel on the pesach is d'oraisa. That's the sefer mitzvahs that I mentioned in Shorish Aleph. I'm going to read that Ramban to you. Just that piece. There's a big piece there, but that piece. Yeah. This one. Right. Third Ramban. V'chein hashir shebamigdash min ha'Torah k'divrei ha'omer ikar shira v'peh v'shira ma'akeves korban. U'ledavid k'moshe shenu m'sechus tameh hashir shayil v'yom beis ha'migdash etc. That the shira on the korban is the eraisa. He brings it from another pasuk. Also, let me just say what he said in the first. Here he writes even better. Vanir divrem shumin ha'Torah k'moshe pirashti v'yah alocha l'moshe mesinai oshu b'chal ha'simcha shintztavenaba. K'moshe Kasuv, this is in what's his name again? In this Franco Madura page Lamed Vav in Sefer HaMitzvot, left column of the Ramban. So he says, what's the makkah for this? K'moshe Kasuv b'yom simchaschem u'moyadeichem u'roshei chodsheichem v'tkatem b'chatzosos al oiloi seichem v'al zipchei shalmeichem. Ki ikar asher b'peh, when they say tkatem b'chatzosos, that's not the ikar, the Gemara is the where the ikar shir b'peh, ikar shir is not b'peh. We pass on halacha ikar shir is b'peh, and the music is just like to accompany. So instead of tkatem b'chatzosos, that's the music. It means to say there was definitely someone singing verses. So he said, ikar shir b'peh ukli l'psum kolo. The kli is nothing more but to make the sound good. So there's a chiv deraisa of the simcha of singing on the korban. Etc. Okay, so we clearly see one thing here. This is Shittas HaRamban. Shittas HaRamban is that the shir Hallel on the korban is zecher deraisa. That's a din deraisa. That's a halacha deraisa. That's the deraisa. It seems to be the Tosfos of Megillah hold the enoch enami. As much as hallel is on the korban deraisa, that has a din of chatzos. The question is now what Chazal decided to say that what? That there's a din of hallel on hallel the night of Pesach, and it's not on the korban. It's on the matzah. What's that? What halacha is that? That l'chari he believed that's a din d'Rabbanan. That he believes is a din d'Rabbanan as much as because it come of what did the Midrabanan? They said this is zeichel of Pesach. He doesn't think that the pshat is that matzah is another tzura of kiyum. The pshat they took the matzah of a matzah roim reklua and made a separate mitzvah. That mitzvah you're mekayim with the matzah itself. So basically, you have a pseudo achilas pesach through the matzah. Then there'd be a possibility of saying it's a deraisa. No, he learned like most people understand. It's a zeichel of korban pesach. Afikaiman. It's a zeichel of korban. A zeichel for hank this mug, and that's the Rabbanan. If that's good, what's the din of hallel at all? So he obviously understands that hallel is not a halacha in the din of matzah. That is mischayed because the kedushas does man. What's his makkah? The Masechta Seifrim. The Masechta Seifrim talk exactly where the Ramban says the opposite. What we see is a din of achila because he brings the brayso of Daf Yud and Erchin. Where's Tosfos come from to say the opposite? Tosfos comes up from the brayso Masechta Seifrim. Those diyukim that the Ramban brings one raya adrab. He understands the Masechta Seifrim explains the Reb Shimon ben Yotzadik. Reb Shimon ben Yotzadik only spoke about night, but not going to tell you there's a day, there's nothing called night. Remember Elazar? There you have it. So this is a shaila. How do we read them? Is it a different Messiahs or is it an explanatory? And that's what you have in front of you. So if you put them there together, Pashit said in the Kedushas as man that we discussed. So this is the shaila on our table. In other words, according to Taisus and Megillah, L'chor, the Hallel of Leil Pesach is not a din of Allah Korban. It's a Locha Kedushas man. Is there a din of Allah Korban? Yes. All those Gemaras in Man Avais are true. There was a din of Allah Korban. But there's also a din of Kedushas Zmanim. What's enough Kamina? And one of them, the women would be Patra, and the other one, the woman would be Chai. So Kumtas Ali, the Taisus is opposed to Taisus in Brachas, and some of the Rishonim, the Ramban, that there's only one Mechayiv of the Hallel of Leil Pesach, which is Al Achila. The Ramban, Ran, Rabbeinu David. But in Taisus, we have to come to the conclusion that's not true. Since it's Drabanan, that's what Taisus is saying. There's no reason to see it as part of the Mishchai because of the mitzvah. The matzah is only Drabanan. If the matzah would be a Kiyam Din Raisa, then of course it's part of the Korban and part of the matzah. But it's not, it's Drabanan. Since it's Drabanan, so Apal Pida, we hold the Geblos Ben Nazariah. And Morer definitely needs Chatzos, because that's definitely all those Drabanan. It's a Kiyum in the Rabbanan and Kiyum is in what? In Korban Pesach, that's all Morer is. But here is something else. It's no such halacha. It's halacha Kedushas Zman, because we learned it from another pasuk the matzah. We don't learn it from Matzah Merim Yochlu. We learn it from the pasuk Be'erev Techlu Matzahs that the Gemara Daf Kuf Chaf. So what's this halal? It's a Rabbanon. They're fine for that. That's what the Rabbanon is. It's Kedushas Zman. Kedushas Zman is a halal Rabbanon. That's what Taisus is saying. That's why Taisus says specifically on that halal. And that's the Nekudas of Machlekes between Taisus and Brachas, or Taisus B'Rachas and Brachas, and the Rashba, and the Ritva, and the Ramban, and all Chachmis for us, versus Taisus and Megillah. How do we understand the Kiyam Din of what of the Matzah Bisman Hazeh? It is a Tzura, it's extension of a Matzah Merim Yochlua, and therefore the Halal could be considered Ikar Deiraisa, a part of Zeichel of the Achila, or is a separate mitzvah of a Matzah Merim Yochlua. That's guess what this Halal stammet in the Kedushas Zman. Since when there's Achilas Matzah Mechayiv Kedushas Mechayiv Halal. Shchitas Pesach is Mechayiv Halal as a mitzvah. Lulav is Mechayiv Halal. Whoever heard that Achilas Matzah for itself is a Halal? Okay. Mamela said it's another pashut, so that's what it comes out. Lamai said, now we understand. So the Rambam Paket, the Rambam Nicholas Chanukah, as we pointed out already before, he learned that the Masechta Seifrim, that he understands if anything that Shat is that the Bryce is telling his mitzvah the Kedushas Hazman. And Hilchas Chanukah, he's talking about Kedushas Hazman. In Kedushas Hazman, there's no Hal of Achilas Pesach or Shchitas Pesach, which is mamish like the Ramban. That's what the Ramban says. That's a davar pasha. And as we understand, so where do these things come? They come from the broad halachas of the Mishnah of Tzadikei, of Gamliel. All that is true. All that is true. Taisus argues. There's another Taisus like this. There's a Taisus in Sukkah. This is something that a lot of people learn. Lamed Ches Amid Aleph. Taisus writes as follows. This is the famous Mishnah of an Isha's Pater from Hallel. Mishnah says in Sukkah Lamed Ches Misha Ye'eved O Isha Yikotem Makrin Oisai Oine Acharein Mashim Oimrim. Making a shekache neiging echet kaires ahalo baitzis arabi v'imo ever the ishroi koton hayo ve'ein mechuyev b'davar ein baitzis amechuyev midei chayvasai. Hilkach oina achrav kol mashu ema. Oina means he spoke loudly. Okay, so you have to say loudly after the person. You're not yoitzu with anything because it's not even shemek oina without going into particulars. Okay, Zok Taisvis. Misha Ye'eved Ve'isha. Mash Makan the Isha Ptura Mi'alol the Sukkahs. We're talking about the Mishnah in Lulav Gazel. We're talking about Sukkahs. She's parted from the Halal Kedushas Hazman. The time, the mitzvah shazman grama. You could say mitzvah shazman grama, and that's why you're potter. You have to do kedushas zman grama. Afagad the halal the lele pesach mashra perik avipsachim the mechayve v'dalet kaisus u'mistamer leitiknu dalet kaisus ella kedei loyma aleim halal v'agada. What does that mean? Mistamer leitiknu dalet kaisus ella kedei loyma aleim halal v'agada. No, obviously we have to we have to look at that with a grain of salt. What is that language? What's he saying? He says he's Avdi Chayv Tal Kaisus, and Tal Kaisus is only there to say Halav Agad. So I'll cook with their Chayv and Halav Agad. That's what he's saying. Shani Halal the Pesa Dalanes Bob Apin Oyaboisanes. Slowly, how do we read this Taisus? Now, there's no way the Taisus thinks that the Mechayiv of Dal Kaisus is the Halav Agad. Goodness sakes, that's a machlekes that they question Rav Chanan and Rava and Daf Kuf Yudzayin Amid Beis. And I don't think Taisus is machriya halacha like Rav Chanan. I don't think that's what's happening here, because that would be very awkward to say the least. Okay, that's not even happening. Okay, no one is that crazy. You never know today, but no one normal would be that crazy. So okay, so what does it mean? It means to say that after we have the takana. Because we were talking that the Agdor is the Kaisis ala mitzvah. Whether ala mitzvah, but made if the Kaisis ala mitzvah, that means they masak. What at the end of what the takana? Because of chayrus we have 4 cups, and because of those chayrus we have those 4 cups on the mitzvah. They're not. It's not 2 stages. It's one source of takana. Because chayrus we are masaking Kaisis ala mitzvah. Okay. If that's the case, that's the source of the kind. But if that, it's not like, first of all, you're b'chayv because of chayrus. By the way, Allah mitzvah, then this Taisa wouldn't make sense. Taisa understand the sachako, those 2 considerations are seen together as one thing. And if hypothetically you can't fulfill the Allah mitzvah, then that's not the Arba Kaisa, that's not the takana. And therefore, if an issue we put for Hallel Agada, that wouldn't be Kaisa Allah mitzvah, they wouldn't have the Arba Kaisas. He doesn't think there's a separate mechayiv which is chayrus. And secondly, by the way, there's also dalet kaisa, it's also kesher bracha or kesher mitzvah. No, he thinks that the sachako of the takana, the those considerations are now put together in one ball. That's what they should say. So he says, "Umistama loitiknu dalet kaisa ela kidei loimer halav agana." Correct? Because that's the takana. We have arba kesher chayrus, which we did in order to say on them mitzvahs. That's the sachako takana. There's no other way of reading this Taisus unless you really think that he's passing Rav Chanan, which would be, I'm going to use the word outlandish, would be the nicest thing I can say about it. Okay, that ain't happening. Okay, you don't state in Taisus. So what is Taisus' answer? So we see the chalkocha, the chayv and kaisis al kocha. It means to say that they're chayv and halal. So why are they chayv and halal? Shani Hallel the Pesadal Anes Ba. What does it mean there? What does it mean that when it says Afim Hayu Ba'isei Anes? Now Zikr, it doesn't mean that the Chi of Hallel is Midin Anes. This is not a lacha deraisa or you Rabban of saying Hallel al Anes. I don't want to tell this to you unless you're people that had the Nes. And you don't have the Nes, with great respect. With great respect to the Torah lacha, V'leficha Chayim Badam Yisat L'Keilu. Keilu doesn't make you pregnant. And the keilu doesn't make you alive, and the keilu doesn't make you balanesh. These vertalach should never be said. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we don't find them in the Rishonim. They're only from the later day saints. Anybody that knows anything about this, knows this is that the Vasmeitos. The Teresh is because the Kedusha says man is nikla because of the Nes. How do we know this? We have this in common with claims. Lamash, where do we find this word of Afen Hayabaysa Nes? Okay, we find it basically by Megillah, by Ner Chanukah, and by Dalet Kaisis. Okay, now tell me, by Megillah and by Ner Chanukah, I can understand the din of Pirsum Nes, or the Nes is Mechayiv the Pirsum Nes, and therefore this year you also in the Nes you're Mechayiv the Pirsum Nes. What do you say by Dalet Kaisis? Dalet Kaisis the din of Pirsum Nes. Does anybody think that Dalet Kaisis the din of Pirsum Nes? Dalet Kaisis Allah is since there's a din of Derech Chayrus, so we show it's true the kiyum din of what? Of we got the Lebincha. We learned Rambam. What's out there? Chayrus. And therefore what? It's halacha presumanisa. Is the din of derech chayrus if you sit on your own? Of course, no one has to know your din is meisiv. But something presumanisa, for goodness sakes. You understand that's not what it means. It means to say that what? Because it's a never pasha. Because the ness is based. The ness is you say the kedushas asman. The kedushas asman is there to mefarshim to us. The ness, yeah. The kedushas asman of Pesach is mefarshim to me and to you, to my children, my grandchildren. What happened? Yitzias Mitzrayim. Va'afim hayu b'yisrael ness. It's a bisa bekutcha. The Taisus here is learning that they get a kedushas asman. Definitely doesn't say the hallel is because of the korban. That's clear. Okay? Doesn't say the halal because of the korban. He definitely doesn't mean the halal is mischayiv because of the halal. So what does he mean? The halal is mischayiv because of the nest. Which din is that? Which din is that? Morda kula alma. Is this again like Hanukkah? So you don't need Isser Malacha. The whole Gemara learned that Pesach is the din of Isser Malacha. It can't be. The Gemara is mefurish. It has to do with the halach of Isser Malacha. The Gemara in Erechim Daf Yudam Days. So kochich means to say because often how you buy sanes the kedushas the man of Pesach is there lefarsim sanes, which certain places means. By default, I don't know any other option to understand this Taisus. That's the chayr of the pshat in Taisus. So what I have here is as follows. Taisus says in the first pashas that it's a din of hala alanes / I understand to mean kedushas as man shebal lefarsim sanes. If there wouldn't be Yisur Malacha, this wouldn't happen. Okay, kipshutai. That's what we learned before. The Leilis Kaddish Chag is the din of daf we learned Isser Malacha. That the Gemara said before in Erechim Daf Yud. If that's the case, so I have as follows. I have the Stam the Taisus in Megillah that's the Rabbanan equals Medin Kedushas Azman. I have Stam the Taisus in Sukkah. Then I have the Taisus Rabbeinu Yehuda Chassid, which is Mashta that's Nachad, that also has a din of what? Of Allah Korban. Also, the din of Allah Korban. Or I begin now. You understand what exactly happened here. But the Rambam is what the Rambam is saying. So we know one thing. The Rambam himself, the Ramban himself writes something interesting. The Rambam himself writes that the Ikar L'Chayiv is not the Zman, it's the Achila, but that's Zman Geula. He also has to figure out how to merge Chiv of the Mitzvah with the Kiddush Zman. Right? If you recall that. The only thing he said, the Mechayiv is not Kiddush Zman. But that there is a Kiddush Zman that Zman Geula he agrees to. That's the Ramban. Obviously the Rambam is going to agree to that. The fact that there's a separate Mechayiv of Kiddush Zman, Balayla, a certain mechayiv of kedushas man balayla, that is something which you only see clearly in the Taisvis L'Chayre in Sukkah and the Taisvis in Megillah. I understand the Rav. There's no question on the Rav to begin with. They obviously went on the rooftops. What happens? A libid Aramam, it's another pasha. They went on the rooftops. They said the Hallel. They had to come back because the din of Dal Kaisis ala Seder, as we discussed, he needed Makusuda. They went back. And they said they drank the wine there, and there's no problem. And there's no problem at all. As you pointed out, he doesn't think it's kosher bracha, it's kosher nishkal mitzvah. What did the Raiva think? Well, the Raiva understood it clearly based on the Mishnah Daf Tzadikei, and where there's, and also on Tzadikei. More than that, the Raiva in Hilchos Korban Pesach does not argue with the Rambam there. The Raiva doesn't write Hagar that the halach Pesach has nothing to do with the Korban Pesach. And if he would argue that he would put his face there, he doesn't put it anywhere. The Ravid obviously agrees that there's a mitzvah halom in a korban. Lo yigor the Rambam Hilchos Korban Pesach. The Ravid doesn't make a note there, and because that's the Reb Gamliel, and that's the Davar Pashut. The Girs is a Rifah Rush, and that's the Pashtus of the Lefichach, and that's what we have. That's the Davar Pashut. They went up and there and they said halom. But Al Kochach, he felt that halal is not mechayv. That's one thing of halal, and Enochanami wasn't done on the kosh. What was Mechayiv al-Klais is the Hal of Kedushas Hazman, which is what Taisus says. Taisus said that Taisus says in Sukkah, why is there? Why they have Halal? Because the Klais is on that Hal of what? The Hal of Kedushas Hazman. Taisus in Sukkah doesn't mention the korban in any fashion, form, or size. He only says because Alanes. Al-Koch, what do we understand? That is the Asarai. But the Enochanami, I agree to you, there's a Halal of the korban, but that's not Mechayiv the korban. Mechayiv the Klaises. Afterwards, they came back and they said Hallel again. That Hallel because the Kedushas is mine, and the Hallel Kedushas needs a kaish. Came before B'Taisus and Sukkah. And maybe that's a double pasha. That's the Nekudas HaMachlokes. According to, there's no kasha from that Gemara and Tzadikah and the Ravid. How could they say Hallel on the roof? Of course they said Hallel on the roof. We didn't korban pesach, but then they said it again. Me that kedushas hazman, and kedushas hazman ain't no chinami. There you have a din of kais. I l'chayr why they give on this kedushas hazman. It's a kedushas hazman grow because this is the kedushas hazman which came al nes. That's the chiddush of this taisvus. That the Hallel of Leil Pesach, although it's kedushas hazman, should be butter, but since it says kedushas hazman shal nes, women are chayiv. Afin oyo nes goes in that too. That's the yesod of the taisvus. So we can now sum this up. Lemaisa, what we have here. Kulam lo pliga, there's a Hallel b'sad chiv korban Pesach. Okay, that's a davar pasha. Is there a din kais on that? Hypothetically, yes. The Rambam says, why not? He has no problem. How is it possible? You have to have the kais downstairs. We have no problem. You said the kais downstairs. The Ravid understood that. No, you went up there, you said the Hallel, but you can't say that. That's nice for Pesach, but you can't do it bisman hazeh. Bisman hazeh, you also have kedushas hazman. You don't have korban Pesach. And kedushas hazman demands a bracha. Demands a kais. Brother dear, you can't say it everywhere else. Bishlema, bisman Pesach. Go up on the rooftops. Say your Hallel there, then come back and say your Hallel again to the kedushas hazman. Mashenkin bisman hazeh. What are you going to the rooftops for? There's no korban anymore. There's only kedushas hazman, like Taisus and Sukkah, like Taisus and Megillah. There's only kedushas hazman, therefore you have to do it with Allah Kais, therefore you have to do it downstairs. You can't go upstairs. That shayla that we have between Taisus and prophets versus Taisus and Megillah / Sukkah, this is the Nekudas HaMachlokes of the Rishonim. I rest my case. Shain, Ginig. Guys, take care. Mayor, you had a question.
Rabbi ended up addressing it.
Oh, thank you. Good thing to do. Okay, guys, see you tomorrow. I sent you a whole packet there with my requirements. I suggest you read it. It's fascinating to see. I don't know if you're aware of that. I'm going to give you two big yesodus. Always, whenever the Rishonim discuss if a person forgot to count, they don't say shachach lispar. They say shachach levorech. Chayzu mevorech. Why don't they say shachach lispar? Read all the Balei HaTosfos. Question number one. Question number two. I suggest you read. You can see the Tosfos is a klishlishi of where the Bahag. The primary source of the Bahag are in the early Rishonim. First of all, we have the Bahag ourselves. Suggest you read them. And the earliest Rishonim that bring him are not Balei HaTosfos. They're late. You do the Ritz Geyos. That's early. It's right after the Kufas HaGaonim. That's the first one. You have to read the Ritz Geyos, how he brings the Bahag. I sent it to you. The Ritz Geyos. Then you go to the Itter. And if you really want to know, look at Seder of Amram Goyen. That's even more interesting. I didn't have it here, so I couldn't send it to you. Okay? See what the Bahag really says. Okay? One thing I can promise you, by the time we finish this little Chakirullah, where there's 49 mitzvahs and one mitzvah, this is it's mitzonis. There's no zecher to this anywhere in the Bahag or in the Rishonim that bring it. It's pashut. This whole chakir, what happens with a cotton shagadol b'sfira, right? You know the bar mitzvah drush that everyone does. It's beged. I don't know if you want to be a let's bakasha. You don't mind, but I suggest you say these drushes on Purim. Okay, that's what you're going to see. That'll be very interesting. Okay, I love doing this. Let's undermine these muskal rishons. Everyone starts there, right? Doesn't everyone start with the Minchas Chinuch says? He was a big Tam Chacham, right? He was the brother-in-law of the Divrei Chaim of Tzanz, Ein Kleinigkeit, a Galicianer who eat, Chassidische. He married Reb Chaim Tzanz's sister. They're Shine. Okay, Adkan Tchum Shabbos. Look it up. Look at the primary sources and do the Taisus last. First, read the Bahag, read the Yitzkayus, read the Itter. Then, what you probably should do is then do the Balei HaTosfos. Then you go to do the Chuvas Maram Rutenberg. I sent that to you too. Then, parallel to the Balei HaTosfos, read the Rav Yah, same generation. Okay, very important to read the Rav Yah. Okay? See what he has to say. When you see that, then you begin to understand whole pieces of Shulchan Aruch, which are really very interesting. Okay, see you guys tomorrow. Okay, regular time, right?